Here's your job. Challenge number 1 is life is a beach ball. And the simple answer to why life is a beach ball is our first speaker is Andy Beach. And Andy Beach, I read his remarks after NAB show about about video as a data type and why we needed a new framework for video in an AI world. Right now, I think all of you know that most large language models are exceptionally text-based. And anyhow, I read Andy's papers and I was kind of blown away, called him up and said, why don't you come here and deliver some of those remarks here to us? And so, Andy Beach, are you ready for the video data type challenge?
Let's do it. Hi, folks. Great to see all of you. Great to see a couple of faces that I was familiar with and some folks I haven't seen before. I will pick on Dan for a second because we were talking before I came out. He works at B&H, and I was like, oh, I've known B&H for years. I used to live in New York. I bought a lot of equipment from you back in the day. In fact, I did my first live stream with some Osprey cards that I bought at B&H in 98. And he's like, they stream video in 98? And then he tried to look for a way to say, that's old, or that's a long time ago. But he did a great job. It's an excellent organization. I've bought a lot of things over the years from there. And I always hope that I just didn't forget on like Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur that I needed to buy something from them, because that was always the hard part. So as Robin mentioned, I've been talking about this for a long time. I thought it would be fun to give a talk on video as a data type. I've been circulating a reference architecture for the last year or so since I left Microsoft that's based around sort of modern video and AI thinking, where we're moving as a industry, what some of the standards are needed for it, etc. It can more or less be summed up in that very sentence, that it's a data type. What do I actually mean by that, though? Because someone's going to say, well, isn't it already a data type? Well, it's an object, yes, but today it's not really queryable in the way that we want. I can't assign it permissions in the way that I want. I can't necessarily run settlements and attributions against it. I have a lot of sidecars and other things that attach around it that I can do stuff with, but the object itself is still really just a dumb object that the computer has to shuttle around. But we're starting to build systems that are inherently more intelligent and contextually understand the content that flows through it. And so we need new versions of this. Now, somebody has already said this is absolutely not new. We've had MXF, we've had IMF, we've got timed media data stores and other elements. Again, those sort of all live as pieces around it. It's the file-based system, it's other elements that go into it. The properties of the system themselves are starting to move into that object, that media piece that I'm talking about. So if we want to visualize it, we think in terms of literally starting at the camera with context, rights, and lineage. It's all not going to be written in the camera, but we're certainly going to get some. And then as we start moving through the system, we're not throwing away data. We're going to continue just to add and accumulate data. We're going to add more context into it as it moves through. Distribution was sort of one of the biggest sin points, particularly after we started fragmenting and streaming everything across a variety of different platforms. We lost all context. Metadata got thrown away. The video and the audio essence moved into a system, and then somebody rebuilt a bunch of new metadata, or they bought a bunch of new metadata associated with it in order to run their specific task. And then it just sort of stayed in that system and it didn't go anywhere. And then an archivist was set the task of going back and recollecting and rebuilding all of that metadata that might go through. But I think it's time for us to think about it in a different way. So I want to think of it as a design requirement that we have as we continue to move through things. Ultimately, when I talk about the media industry, we've really dealt with three different buckets that the content falls into in some way. You're either making it, you're moving it around somewhere, or you're applying context to it or meaning. You're establishing some form of meaning around it. So it's basically where it works, where it happens, where the tools live, The tools ultimately, though, are very much the weather. We've seen all of the tooling change around us and evolve around us over 30 plus years of working on this, and it accelerates. The new tools are constantly changing out from underneath us. So I think ultimately the fight has moved. 25 years ago, turn of the century, we were heavily fighting around how we were going to distribute. We began moving into a very fragmented ecosystem and streaming things. That became the rise of discovery as the main fight, establishing APIs and algorithms that could find ways to track the content in some way and make it more discoverable. So it no longer became, I knew exactly where to get the content. It became, I have a system that will show me and surface the content that's relevant and contextual to me, hopefully at the right time in the right place. But now I think it's going to move. I think it's emerging into that meaning. Now that does not mean we solve discovery. We've still broken discovery, and discovery has lots of places that it needs to be established and fixed. But I think as we get more into this meaning space and we embed more context into the content itself in the systems, then we will see more of it. And I refer to that a lot in my writing as one of the seams, one of the places that we will be lining up for these battles and these conversations as we move forward, because I believe that in the meaning section, that is where the value is going to stay put for the content. There's a term that I constantly use repeatedly in my work around substrate. Everything that builds up into that meaning space is a substrate component. Everything that came in the make and move space are rapidly commoditized and continually compressed down and either replaced or made much, much cheaper. It may not feel like it right at the moment because models are so damn expensive. I'm spending a lot of money on models right now, just running tests for myself, but they are commoditizing. You can just look at how rapidly they are changing the models that are in front of us. They're changing the pricing business model underneath of it. We went from talking about pricing to tokens to context windows to other areas, which tells me that it is a business model that is built on solid ground, that they are looking for the sweet spot on what their models can do and what price we are willing to pay. But we are far from the end of that road. We don't know yet what the bottom price of a model to do the work is, or even where we necessarily want that model to do the work. So we continually see that going down over time, while we see the substrate elements, the pieces that shore up all of that, the infrastructure parts of it, ultimately are gaining value as they allow the content to be more addressable in these new ways. So we end up with a system where we've got concentrated suppliers and commodity input. Both of those elements can absolutely be true at the same time. One of the examples that I thought was useful for this was Keynote. Anne Greenberg, funny enough, texted me the other day. She was sorry she couldn't be here. She was an early founder and involved in Keynote. She's benefited well from it being resold more than a few times at multiple nine-figure values. It is ultimately an accumulation. I call that a substrate business because it is accumulating the data and the valuable components that go along with the media. She's made a business, and Keynote has made a business out of reselling the information about the content back to the people who are working with the content directly. If you had shown me this as a business on paper before it ever started, I'd have thought you were crazy that someone was going to be able to turn that into a business. Here it is, years and years later, still wildly successful at what it does. Content ID is another element that has continued to be valuable, and it is not the only version. We're now seeing those IDs move out into other areas. We've got Hand that is working on human identification in the elements, because it's equally important to be able to have a machine read and understand the human involvement that goes on within the systems that we're beginning to build and architect. Okay, so we've got my three main pieces. We've got the make, the move, the mean. We have that seam that goes in there. And then these are the main areas where I see right now, for at least the next 5 to 10 years, the value is heavily going to continue to accumulate. It's going to be around the businesses and the tooling that helps us with the rights and the policies with the content that we're looking at, the context and the asset memory itself. So again, understanding what the intent of the content was, and then helping serve it up to the right audiences or make it available to the producer at the right time as part of what's going on. The usage in the settlement pieces. This has been a thing in the business that has taken months and years to do rev recs and other elements. This has to get faster in the scale business that we're looking at with content, and the tooling that we're building is certainly going to help that. And then ultimately still routing and distribution, while fairly commoditized out as far as it can be today, it is still accumulating value because it becomes all the more valuable as we continue to increase the volume of content that's coming through. As I put down here, there is an area that has been persistent for a number of years around both compute, storage, and networking. They continue to persist. They still have value. They don't commoditize as rapidly as the models and the other pieces of the system, in part because they've already kind of commoditized to some degree as much as they can. In my architectures, there's 2 additional elements that don't live on their own layer. They actually persist through all of the layers. And so they're represented by these vertical columns. Their identity, that's not just the identity of the people working in the systems, what we would think of as like traditional role-based access. It's not just the content IDs or the other elements we're talking about. It's all of those identities. It's being able to take all of the various identity systems and make sure that they have the ability to interoperate, and that the overall technology systems that we're building understand how they interact with them. And then of course the other is all of the data. The data in the systems that we're building is becoming a first-class citizen, and it's in fact sometimes considered more valuable than the IP, the content itself, in many ways for what it does and what it provides. So as we continue moving forward, I think these elements that I call substrates that have lived as separate units from the content itself will become more and more embedded into the media objects. And that will allow us to both speed up the ability to transact and do business with it very rapidly, but it's also going to make it incredibly friendly to the AI model systems. We will literally have a way to very rapidly understand what's been ingested into a model and extract the value back out of it and put pricing policies against whether they can leverage it or use it based on rules that we assign at the time that the object or the media is created. So that's a very skimmed down version of my reference architecture. I did not want to try and in 25-ish minutes get everybody to understand every single tile that's on the screen. The architecture itself is about 5 different clusters that equate out to 70 different tiles that break into all the various functions of the business. I've mapped multiple different types of businesses, OTT distribution, live sports production, ad tech and advertising systems against the architecture, looking for who the right partnerships for them are in the space, what the valuable technologies they are, and maybe what the gaps in their own product thinking has been based on what I see in other places. If you're interested in the overall piece, I'll have a link at the end so that you can read my thinking about this and see the overall reference architecture yourself. But this is an area that I believe is already underway. I'm not saying anything that is magic or new speak in many ways. I'm just sort of putting a bow around everything that I see that's already occurring. C2PA is already creating a manifest that I can embed inside of any digital media file and lives with it through its lifespan, and I can reference that and query it to find out information about it. Similarly, Movie Labs has been doing a lot of work. I have a slide for that in a second that I'll show you. SAG-AFTRA is already working on a set of avatar pay rates and scales, so that if I'm a human and I'm giving rights to my digital self to be used, I have a pay scale that I can use and assign against that. And then there's work that's going on at the data layer and the carriage tier around all of this as well. So all of this is moving forward already. It's really a question of like, what happens now? And do we allow sort of individual large platforms to own it? Or is it something that moves into open standard spaces so that it's more interoperable? I personally hope it's much more of the second piece that's out there. When I have people look at this map, my reference architecture, if they're an operator, they're thinking of it more as a capabilities map. They're looking again at the pieces that they think they should be looking at, where they should be working, and again, what the gaps in their thinking may be. For a vendor that's looking at it, it may end up being a positioning map. You see where you fall in against other competitors in the space, who your allies are that you know you need to work with because they're the next layer up or down from where you are. And a strategist, hopefully like myself, is thinking of it as an overall map of where we're moving as we go forward. So I think this is what the next decade looks like, and I hope that more and more people think about this in terms of that substrate, and that being where the work and ultimately the power for the next 10 years is starting to accumulate as we move through it. If this is interesting, if it resonates, I'd encourage you to go read the overall write-up on it. It's about 25 pages. As I said, the reference architecture itself is about 70 tiles. This is the V5 version. I've already been challenged pretty heavily in the last week, and there's probably a V6 that'll get published to the same place in a week or two after I've completed arguments with engineers who think I've missed a couple of key areas. So I don't mind that. And I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in the business for 30 years. If I had a nickel for every time an engineer told me I was wrong, I'd have a lot of nickels at this point. So if you think I'm wrong, please come tell me. If you think I'm right, I'd love to hear that too. Don't worry. I hope you enjoy today. I think this will be a great session. I'm looking forward to the summer camp, and I really thank SVG for letting me help kick things off.
Andy, we can stay up there. We're gonna grab a few questions.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, it's summer camp. We're not as pressured. All right. So let me see who's about. Oh, there you are. We got somebody right here. Dave Van Hoy. We sit on way too many boards together.
Hi, Dave.
So I'm curious. I love the way you're bringing this flow in a way that I think content creators can really think about it, because it's a lot of tech, and I know that even our content creation groups really struggle with sometimes which tools, which things to get embedded where. I'm curious if, there's a lot of talk about what Alluvio's up to, especially, and I think
Sure.
that blockchain track through. I'm curious, how do you see that kind of technology rolling out for, let's say, not the movie studios?
Yeah. So I think that's already starting to happen. I think Alluvio is a great version of that for showing a path forward, but I don't think it's the only one that gets there as well. I know that in Europe, I unfortunately forget the name of the startup, but I know there's a startup based out of Finland that is doing exactly that, where they're allowing, particularly at the moment, nonprofits and symphonies and others to host their content against a blockchain and provide settlement back every time someone buys, rents, watches the content. So we're seeing tests in that space already. We will see smart contracting for creators and independents that also begins to become some form of a SaaS. It may not be official blockchain. I feel like that name got a big marketing bash, but it will be a trusted ledger or a confidential compute or some other flavor of that falls out in the piece. And we will continue to see more and more places make a version of it available, because it is a clean and convenient way to do these kinds of rights lookups or settlements that I'm talking about.
That's the body back like to sell out. Do you think the dream of taking that all the way down, particularly is possible?
So the
West Wing as well.
Yeah. So Dave said, is the dream of taking it from camera to computer actually possible and viable? I mean, in the short term, no, because it is a difficult and challenging piece. But I think the system will continue to evolve, and we will see rudimentary versions of it where that actually does work. I think Alluvio and others would probably argue we already have it. But I think of them still more as really cool demos and really cool proof of concepts, but we don't necessarily see it at scale and capacity, but we will likely see it, I'd say, again, within the next, I think 5 years is the earliest, 10 years is the latest in that time frame that things like that become resolved. And in part, it's because we're still lacking some of the components I'm talking about. If we had more of the data embedded and riding with the content, we would probably see more of that blockchain style RevRec move forward. Yes.
Right.
Did I say something wrong about movie labs and you have to yell at me now?
Hey, Andy. Jim Hellman from Movie Labs. No, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the different types of provenance that are required for different purposes, right? You have the authenticity aspect, which, C2PA covers very well. In some of the production workflows that we're looking at, you may have a lot of other data that you want to capture. You may even want to be capturing things down to the level of prompts. You certainly want to be capturing all of the ingredients. I want to know whether this particular image that was used to, as a control net into a video, or if I have a character rendition that, was that human generated? Was that AI generated? And you're probably not going to be putting all of the whole ingredient, the whole genealogy, if you will, of an asset into C2PA metadata, into a manifest. So I guess, what are your thoughts, on, and we mentioned blockchain, and maybe you can have trusted databases without them necessarily being blockchain based.
Yeah.
I guess, where do you see that data going, and how do we get to a point where that data is actually capturable? Because obviously, if it goes into the asset itself as provenance metadata in C2PA, it's there. But in the case of databases, how does it get there?
Yeah, so I think for the foreseeable future, and by the way, before I answer that, there was a slide that got left out of these that I wanted to call out, where I was giving you guys a shout out because last week you came out with your vocabulary around production. And I think that's a great working example that goes with this. So I would encourage everybody to go check out the new Movie Labs vocabulary that just launched around sort of standardizing production terms that models will use, so that we see more consistency. I think consistency helps and is a thing that's needed here. And it's really just an offshoot of the ontology work that's been going on for a number of years that I equally think is valuable. Where I see the things playing out is, you're right, we're not going to be able to stuff all of this information into a manifest that lives inside of C2PA, but we certainly can begin putting a lot of identifiers and identity pieces that flow through the system, and then it can reference the data that goes through those other pieces. So it may not know inherently everything that's there, but it knows where to go find it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good starting point until we continue to evolve and mature the system and figure out some other clever way to either further compress data and therefore put more of it into the object itself, or make the lookup tables and the knowledge graphs and the vector databases more sophisticated and sort of all more persistent in the workflows.
Yeah, thanks for the shout out. And just, the creative vocabulary, we started with cinematography, basically to try and give clear definitions to terms that people might want to use creatively when they're interacting with generative AI systems. So what you'll see up in our website is just cinematography, but we're looking at going into, lighting and editing and all kinds of areas. We just need
super valuable. I'm looking forward to seeing more of it emerge.
Join the group. We're open to participation. So
that'll be great.
All right. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Jim. Any other questions? Oh, there's one behind you, Marty.
Oops. Here you go.
Hi, Andy.
Yeah, sir, you're going to tell me I'm wrong, I hope.
No. I'm going to ask you, I guess, a different question because I see a lot of in the content space with linear channels and stuff that you have advertising models over there. And I guess one of the questions I have with your discussion on settlement and stuff, how does that play in with advertising? Because, you know, you have these concepts of linear channels and free channels where, you know, people who have the content may not necessarily get the value from it, but the channel itself would get value from advertising and settlement.
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously this is an area that is far from resolved. But I think we all would agree that ad tech is an area that's been sorely lacking updates for a number of years and is looking for new ways of both defining the attributions against the content and the material that's there, and how the revenue gets agreed and settled ultimately. In sort of the fast channel world and in the linear space, I do think that there is opportunity, particularly with more AI in the systems, sort of contextually, continually looking at the material that's there, the information, looking for additional attributions that might fall outside of a traditional either SCUDdy marker or ad placement or other element, because we will have the ability to sift and pull greater context using LLMs from the systems that we're looking at. We'll pick up on references to it, or maybe even allusions to something. We see a lot of advertising or even sort of memes online that mimic popular advertising or popular cultural moments, and with the use of LLMs to better find that context and draw a correlation, we'll be able to apply at least some sort of, if not direct revenue, at least a marketing attribution that goes back to it in a broader way.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Andy, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
You have to look.